Chapter 11 Bait. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. When Yi Qingxian awoke from a long period of being unconscious, he cried out in pain. Stole a musician's instrument, escaped from the fog and the iron plant, successfully got away from the musician with 2 friends, and finally, in order to break away from the musician's lock on you, jumped into the freezing water, and swam all the way back into town. Next to him, a voice sighed weakly. Yi, you really did quite a thing back there. Mr. Wolf Flute. Yi Qingxian was surprised to see the man in the wheelchair, pale as someone on the verge of death. What happened to you? Nothing. I pushed my limit with the excessive use of sound of heart. I had to do a heart resuscitation, but then my wound opened again, so I lost a couple of 100 cc's of blood. Oh, you do not know what a cc is. About half of a big pot, Wolf Flute said with ease. Then he sighed, you scared me. I thought you drowned yourself since you couldn't be a musician. Yi Qingxian was silent for a long time, then said in low voice, thank you. I should be the one thanking you. Wolf Flute shook his head. If it were not for your friend who stole the rain artist's instrument, he would have come to my doorstep last night and killed me. Oh. Yi Qingxian was surprised for a moment. The one you stole the instrument from was my enemy. I wouldn't have been hurt if it wasn't for him. Wolf Flute sounded a bit embarrassed. Actually, I was careless. I am much more powerful than he is. Really, you have to believe me. Haha. Actually, I wouldn't know. Yi Qingxian scratched his head, embarrassed, and felt weak all over his body again. You were rescued from hypothermia. You should probably lie down. Wolf Flute pushed him back to bed, and suddenly said, Yi, there is a question I'd like you to answer for me. Yeah. Although I got all the details from your friend, I don't understand how you escaped from the fog magic. That's not something a kid can force his way out of. Yi Qingxian was also clueless. You mean those hands in the fog? Yes, it was a song written by members of a cult called Mother Goose. Avalon Bridge is falling. Only 2 sections are still being circulated. One can create its own mist demon, with foul poison. The other is able to control the iron plant which comes from plants and soil. The instrument was in your hands, so he wasn't able to use all of his power, but the binding capacity from the fog was the strongest among its kind. To break free, even musicians cannot do that without paying a heavy price. To tell you the truth, I do not know why either. Yi Qingxian smiled wryly. If there was a reason, then it might be this. He took off his ring, and took it apart. After the ring was taken apart, it became a slender and flexible string. Even though it had been bent for so many years, it was still straight and tough once it was stretched out, radiating with dim silver light. What is this string? Sorry, I cannot recognize its origin. It is too long for a guitar, too hard for a violin, but... Wolf Flute took a closer look, amazed. This is a very rare material. You know what it is? Yi Qingxian eyes lit up. Yes, this may be from a certain school's manufacturing technology. This material is green gold refined with alchemy, as well as cultivated and alienated ether. That kind of alloy material can only be used in a very powerful instrument that you can feel it. It still has a leftover scent of ether. Too bad. It was once part of a musical instrument, but has been split into a string. Now it's useless. Useless. Ether has its own order of movements. If not moved accordingly, it will only be a mess. The existence of the instrument is to help the musician control the massive amount of ether, to attain a precise control. This kind of control relies on the harmony of countless parts, as well as implementation. It cannot be done with any single component. The ether collected on it was probably the reason you got away, but I am afraid it won't be able to do it again. Wolf Flute thought for a moment, then gave the string back to him. Keep it, no matter who gave you this, it is a very precious gift. Yi Qingxian silently took it back, and wrapped it around his index finger. Yi, are you awake? The door opened. Victor, who had waited for a long time, rushed in and checked again and again to make sure Yi was okay before letting out a relieved sigh. Old Phil was much calmer now. It slowly walked in, gave everyone a disgusted look as if it was the king of this place, then jumped on the bed. It took a whiff of Yi Qingxian, then sat on his chest reassuringly, and began whipping its tail at him. It was not painful but very embarrassing. "This is your dog. Looks very powerful." Wolf Flute came closer, staring back at old Phil. He smacked his lips and barked as if trying to communicate with old Phil. Old Phil looked at him expressionlessly, unmoved, and as calm as someone related to Father Ban. Although face to face with a musician, the dog's eyes were still reserved with disdain, as if mercifully looking at its slave. It had guts, even Yi Qingxian had to admit that. Oh, strange. It did not respond to me. Wolf Flute did not mind, and continued making more weird gestures and sounds. Yi Qingxian was confused. "What are you doing?" I'm talking to it. I do not think he's like an ordinary dog. I'm wondering if it understands a wolf's temperament." Wolf Flute raised his hands above his head, gestured at the ears, and quietly hummed at old Phil. If he had a tail, he would certainly be wagging his tail also. Old Phil gave him the side eye. Seeming impatient, it finally raised its forepaw casually and waved in front of Wolf Flute, then mercilessly slapped him in the face. And then it put its paw down, leaving a dirty paw print on Wolf's face. Yi Qingxian was shocked, Victor was shocked, and Wolf Flute was also shocked. There was a long silence. Ahem, ahem. Wolf Flute moved away uncomfortably, pretending to cough twice. "Well, your pet has a very strong personality. Have you ever seen any pet like this?" Yi Qingxian thought. He had actually never dared to treat old Phil as a pet. Indeed, ever since Yi Qingxian had met old Phil, it had lived in this world as a wealthy bachelor. For 5 years, old Phil had always lived a heroic existence. Rebellious, fighting with powerful force, and always ran ahead of everyone else, never letting anyone else be in charge of it. To be his master. I'm definitely not qualified. Actually, he has always thought of me as its follower, Yi Qingxian thought. Well, enough said. Since we are all here, let's talk about something serious. Wolf Flute wiped the paw print off of his face, and started to look serious. He looked around at the 2 boys and the dog. "In order to save ye, I also took a great deal of risk myself. So, the priest promised me he would not intervene with this matter. There are some things that I'd like you to know. At the very least, you have to understand what you have done." Seeing the 2 faces turn solemn, Wolf Flute nodded with satisfaction. "First let's talk about the rain artist." Rain artist. The musician Victor had stolen the music instrument from. Rain artist was not his original name. Like Wolf Flute isn't my given name either. These are titles given by the sacred city by evaluating one's resume, past conduct, and specialty in music after reaching the resonance level. Previously the rain artist was someone nameless. He was considered to be like most people without talent, and probably would be stuck at the student level for life. Suddenly, he escalated in an exploration, and successfully became a musician. Because of his talent, the sacred city awarded him the title of the rain artist. He had a smooth path thereafter, and was considered having a solid foundation. Until 6 years ago, someone found out that he had massacred a whole village to sacrifice to Hyakum. He had disappeared since then, becoming one of the most wanted black musicians. Sacrifice. Yes, the price for exploring the originator, with the power of Satan, is life and blood. However, since he could use other people's lives, why sacrifice himself? In most recent years, it has not been uncommon for musicians to go to the dark side. Wolf Flute's eyes no longer carried a smile, but were chilly. All the disciplined musicians from the silent authority will hunt him down to the ends of the earth, until his head is hanging on the wall of the blasphemy. Justice has to be done. Whether or not he had attacked me, now that I've found him, he must die before he causes greater chaos. Yi Qingxian silently listened to him talk, but a bad feeling gradually rose in his heart. Why was Wolf Flute saying all this? And why did he look at Victor when he spoke? Bait. Suddenly, Yi understood. He looked up at Wolf and said, "You need a bait." In his gaze, Wolf Flute's eyes also lit up. He hesitated and sighed. Nobody likes a kid too smart, Yi. Your wound also came from him? Yi asked. Yes, a sneak attack, Wolf Flute admitted. He's better than me at sudden attacks. I almost died. Then he chased you here. Yi Qingxian went on to say, he knows you are recuperating, but does not know you are with us. Because no one expected Victor to steal the bag, no one knows that I will bring you this news. He still thinks we're hiding in the town. Without his instrument, he will not be able to kill you, so he will hide himself in the dark. But as long as the instrument can be retrieved, he has nothing to fear. Yi Qingxian touched his string on the finger, and finally began to understand. His eyes gradually lit up, so if you want to win, you will need an opportunity to have him walk into the trap willingly. Chapter 12 Putting Out the Fire. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Can't we destroy the instrument? The resonance between the instrument and the musician is even closer than that of husband and wife or blood relationship. If he senses any damage to the instrument, we will lose the initiative. Whether he plans a large-scale sacrifice or attacks forcefully, we will be powerless. Yi Qingxian responded, we just. It is impossible. Wolf Flute right away understood what Yi Qingxian was thinking. You have not seen the sacrifice, so you do not understand. As long as a dark musician plays and sings the evil praise, it will be enough to attract Satan's eyes. The voice of praise will cover the whole town. When all the people can only see their own blood as it exudes from their skin, flowing into the river, all the lives will be taken by the palms of the abyss. This process can take up to 3 hours because the musician's performance is only the bass tone and the sacrifice is the main part of praise. This is the most annoying point of the evil cult, that even if it is easy to kill him, it is difficult to stop his sacrifice from fighting back. However, Hyakum is not a generous god. Sacrifice is also a very strong torture for the musician himself, so unless the circumstances are extreme, he will not use it so easily. Hearing Wolf Flute's words, Yi Qingxian turned silent. So, do we have to do that? Yes, this is the best way. Wolf Flute said, Yi, I'm sorry, but I can't do anything either. How about the town's garrison? And for musicians, the number of ordinary people does not matter. Adding them on will be just adding more casualties. Wolf Flute's eyes became cold. I am sorry that I brought him here. I will not let him continue the damage. I have an even more important mission to accomplish. If I don't complete it, there will be hundreds of times more dead people than those that died in the town. In silence, he turned his head and stared at Victor. Victor's face gradually became paler. Sorry, although I do not know you, I have to give this task to you. This is not forced by the musician act, but I hope you can understand the truth. He touched Victor's shoulder. This is my personal request, thanks. His words stopped abruptly, because the palm of his hand did not fall, but was caught by another palm from the side, making him unable to move. O.org. He never thought that the Eastern youth's arms had such a strong force, like vices. Victor was stunned. Wolf Flute turned and looked down at the youth in surprise. Yi, not now. Wolf Flute tried to figure out what to say, but saw the juvenile looking up, his white hair shining like silver metal in the candlelight, his dark pupils glaring at him. I will go. Yi Qingxian whispered. The rain artist saw me before. If I hold the instrument, he won't doubt it. When Yi Qingxian walked out of the room, he saw the father silently standing at the end of the corridor. The priest stared at him quietly with complicated feelings. Yi Qingxian bowed his head in silence. When he walked by the father, he whispered, "Sorry for letting you down, father. I'm probably not the material of a priest." The father was silent, letting him leave through the church door, carrying the black box. The old dog did not know what happened, and cheerfully followed him and left. Soon, Wolf Flute pushed the wheelchair out of the room. "This is the recruitment of a musician which I have no control over. But there is one thing I want you to understand," Father Ban suddenly said softly. "I am telling you on behalf of the church representative that if something happens to him, but you are still alive, you will pay a big price for your mistake." "He will come back alive," whispered Wolf Flute. "Even if I'm dead." Then, he looked at the night outside the church, and could not help but sigh. He continued to push the wheelchair to the scheduled location. In his mind, he still saw the youth's expression while he said those words. Solemn and peaceful, and even, a smile that he had not perceived. It was the smile of a moth flying towards the flame with no thought of returning. Since his escape in the evening, Yi Qingxian had been in coma for an hour. When he went back to the street, it was already late at night. In the silent dark night, there were no pedestrians. Yi Qingxian walked alone in the street, hearing the yellow dog's footsteps behind him. Beside him, old Phil looked up. Its eyes were still disgusted, not understanding what Yi Qingxian wanted. Seeing old Phil's fearless eyes, Yi Qingxian suddenly became more relaxed. For so many years since he come to the city far away from Avalon, things and people had changed, but old Phil still accompanied him, not caring about the little brother being a lazy waste, but often catching some dead mice to feed him, for which he felt gratitude. "Old Phil, go back." Yi Qingxian squatted down, touched its collar and softly said, "Thank you for being with me for all these years." Old Phil tilted its head and looked at him, seeming to not understand what he was talking about. After a long time, it reached out its claws and patted Yi Qingxuan's shoulder twice. It was its sign of encouragement which nobody knew where it learned it from. Old Phil barked and yawned, then turned away. At the end of the street it looked back at Yi, then embarked on the road home. Under the moonlight, Yi Qingxian watched as old Phil walked further away. He lowered his head, untied the silver rope on the black box, and tore off the seal. Cold river water from the cracks in the box dripped on the ground, leaving a wet trail. Wolf Flute had hand-carved the seal to lock the resonance of the instrument. But now, with the rope unlocked, it once again began to tremble, and issued a call to its owner. Yi Qingxian quietly waited and recalled the voice of Wolf Flute. "Rain artist is not a hard to fine singer, nor is he a talented scholar. I don't know how much he knows of the runes, but it is certain that most of his ability relies on the instrument. So, as long as you take it, Rain artist will come to you, but he won't use too powerful of a music score. This will be the opportunity to take advantage. But you have to be careful. Hyakum has often given his attendant some strange abilities and props." Wolf Flute had stroked the flute on his knee, coldly. "Your task is only to lure him out. Once he appears, the instrument should be destroyed, and you should leave quickly. I will follow you in the dark and it will be my task to deal with him," Yi Qingxian silently recalled, ensuring that there was not any misunderstanding. In the silence, he heard the sound of ocean waves from the distance, echoing the fear in his heart. It resounded in his chest. He heard the sound of his heartbeat, chaos, panic and trembling uneasily. "If I die, will the father be sad? He is a qualified parent. He adopted me and condoned my rebelliousness for so many years. Also, old Phil and Victor. Will they be fine in the future?" Yi Qingxuan's thoughts suddenly paused and his imagination stopped. He finally heard the footsteps from afar, so low and so quiet. "He came," he whispered to himself. Yi Qingxian turned to stare at the place where the sound came from, and suddenly, he no longer felt afraid. Obviously he was filled with fear and uneasiness, but his heart suddenly became calm, the blood still flowing, like the ice water flowing in a glacier, so quiet and so peaceful. It may just be me. Come on, he whispered, either musician, or monster, or fate, I will not be afraid. In the silence, the moonlight shone down. Under the dim light, someone walked heavily out from the darkness, as if he were carrying a very heavy weight, or as if he had a serious injury. His footsteps staggered, dragging his body, exhibiting great difficulty to move forward. He went under the moonlight. He stiffly looked up and saw Yi Qingxian and smiled. The axe he dragged on the ground sparked happily. He came. But it is not right, a voice suddenly called in Yi Qingxuan's heart, this is not right. The vaguely familiar shadow wore a gray leather coat. His face was shrouded under a dark hood, and the axe in his hand reflected the moonlight. The heavy axe was dragged across the ground with sparks flying. The man raised it high above his head as if trying to cut off the moon, and then he rushed over, screaming with madness. No. Yi Qingxian suddenly realized. But it was too late. A desolate flute suddenly sounded, as falcons rushed into the sky, higher and higher. It rose with a swaying melody and then descended from the sky, sweeping the earth, and the earth began to tremble. The flute music swayed like a ghost, issuing a call. Then dust flew into the sky. Wrapped by the moonlight, it trembled and blurred, forming a concrete shape. It walked on the ground, silver hair flying in the wind, like the moonlight torrent. Sharp shouts burst from its mouth. It jumped up from the ground and into the air, revealing its large stature. It was a huge wolf. With the call, a number of the same giant wolves jumped from the eaves and the walls. The speed was like a road of silver trajectory circling in the fog. Just for a short moment, they came before the man, stopping the sharp axe in his hand. Under the wolves' attacks, the fine iron axe was like mud. It broke and splintered. At the same time, his legs broke too. The wolves rushed on, completely splitting the corpse, but stopped suddenly at the end. Wolf flute, stop. Yi Qingxian shouted, he is not the rain artist. The wolves instantly stopped. They stared at the man in the pool of blood. A dozen pairs of green eyes stared at him, making him shudder. He suppressed his overwhelming fear, and walked into the pool of blood. He forced himself to tear off the hood, and stood, shocked. This person could not be the rain artist. Under the moonlight, he recognized that ugly and swollen face. This man was Pippin, the lumber in town. He looked very ugly, because he went through a serious illness when he was young. Although he was always drunk, he was a very good person who had helped many street kids. Because his appearance was so frightening, he had to live in the wood hut in the far end of the town, only the stray cats accompanying him. But why did he come here? Why did he raise his weapon towards me? In shock, he saw Pippin's pupils suddenly move. A black dot spread through the white eyes. Pippin started, laughing. Chapter 13 The Demon of Rain and Breath of Boiling Blood. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In a flash, Pippin jumped up from the ground. It was like power within burst out of his body, and his whole frame had extended a few sizes. Some of his joints were ruptured from the brutal action in that instant, but his speed was incredibly fast. As if a huge iron ball brushed past his body and flew away, Yi Qingxuan's eyes saw a flash, then everything turned pitch black. Dazed, he felt himself knocked into the wall. In the moonlight, Pippin leaped into the air, held on tight to the black box, then turned and threw it into the darkness. Soon after, the furious wolf pack jumped up from the ground and tore him into pieces. With numerous bone fragments, chunks of flesh and blood flying around, the black box flipped and stumbled, and finally stopped at someone's feet at the end of the street. A large silver wolf followed very closely, like a shadow of the box. The guy looked at the silver wolf's grim face and smiled. He bent over, and pressed down on the black box. Crash! In a blink of an eye, the black box set off a deafening sound. With a violent sound, an invisible power like a hammer crushed the wolf's head into the green stones of the ground. Blood flew onto the box like mercury, and whitened a corner of the stone. The black box started to slowly crack until it completely turned into powder. The exquisite clarinet fell into the hands of the man, no longer trembling after the burst as if it had finally been returned to where it belonged. What a pity, wolf flute. The guy took off his hat, and revealed his white pupils. A nice trap, but it did not work on me, and killed an innocent man in the process. Are you regretting it now? He seemed very old, his face wrinkled, nothing like the 30-something-year old man wolf flute had described. But those white eyes moved with a coldness, more chilly than the wolf pack. If beasts gave a man fear, then this ruthlessness and cruelty could freeze a man's soul. Sorry, no. With the wolves growling and circling around came the voice of Wolf Flute. He already died when you controlled him with the worm. From Pippin's broken skull, a leech-like black organism crawled out from his ear. It had originally lived as a parasite in Pippin's brain. It crawled out and swam quickly through the pool of blood, leaving a trail of blood behind it. It came to the feet of the rain artist, and finally wrapped around his wrist, hardening into a strange bracelet. The rain artist looked down gently, admiring the worm bracelet on his wrist. He sighed softly, you see, I paid a great price for this reward. It had helped me through many difficult times, including this one. As he was talking, he looked around at the scenery with a surprised and admiring expression on his face. It is hard to imagine. I have chased you a long way here, and it is hidden in this ridiculously small town. I won't let you have it, a dark voice spoke as if from all directions. I dare not carry with me something as terrible as this. My order was only to destroy it. The rain artist suddenly laughed. Similarly, I can, he paused, the clarinet in his hand suddenly rising up with a chilling bang, destroy you. The explosion sounded like a dying whistle. When the whistling spread, numerous boiling sounds followed. The sea breeze suddenly started dancing furiously, the sound of the wave became blurry. A huge amount of ether awoke from the whistling sound. It came together from all directions, swallowing every drop of the vapor. The air suddenly became extremely dry. Every breath came with a burning sensation. Then a pale fog spread from beneath the rain artist into the air like a suffocating mist. The fog immersed the entire street, everything was blurry. Then, water drops appeared from out of thin air, colliding like a rainstorm in the fog, as fast as arrows. Along their way they took away any warmth in the air, leaving behind a layer of frost. Suddenly, where the fog had enveloped, heavy rain began to pour. Silver wolves roared into the mist, but they had lost his trail and could no longer find the man. Musicians of the school of modifications were best at manipulating the nature of objects, swaying storms and frost, making flames and iron walls. Among all musicians, they were the best suited for the battlefield because of their great destructive power. With the clarinet singing, he quickly finishing playing a measure, summoning a suffocating fog storm heavy enough to freeze any ordinary man. Went back to hide in his shell, Wolf Flute spat. His pupils turned vertical like an animal, staring at the fog and the rain, Kramer Variation Opus 74, also known as Demon of Rain. But this was not the most dangerous, not even close. So he needed to be very alert. In the fog, the clarinet suddenly sounded. The sound, like countless people sobbing in the rain, spread quickly. It was like iron bees beating their wings, like ghosts calling out, wandering in the fog. Inside the fog, a sudden harsh whistle came through the endless tornado, effortlessly punching a big hole in the silver wolf's neck. The silver wolf's head was broken, hanging on its neck. It rolled on the ground in the rain, but then it was completely cut by something behind it. Eventually, that silver wolf dissipated, leaving small, deep holes in the ground. In those holes, there were many long and thin iron pieces. These iron pieces embedded into the earth, still with burning lights. But once out of the fog, the heat disappeared, as if the fog took it away, back to where it came from. This was one of the reasons why the demon of rain was known as the music of massacre. Through many different combinations of notes, it could produce exploding iron, which contained a force of destruction so powerful, that it was nearly undefeatable. The fog was alive. It was a living thing. It constantly absorbed light and heat from its surroundings, which was why the temperature had become so cold. Then the fog would explode as a medium along with the iron. No matter how heavy the armor, or how sturdy the walls, the impact of the fog could not be stopped. If someone was hit, they would probably be ripped in half. With only a loud noise, the upper half of the body would have to say goodbye to the lower half. Or perhaps the whole body would become mincemeat. This was the most dangerous aspect of the rain artist because killing was his talent. The music continued, and the rain became denser. Shards of very thin iron shot in all directions. The iron easily cut through the wolves' necks and the claws, killing them instantly. But with wolf flute's even more depressing notes, more wolves had appeared from all over the earth. It seemed like it would never end. The summoning from wolf flute continued to bring more wolves from the void. Almost a whole pack of wolves had shown up. Those wolves, almost as tall as humans, were no ordinary creatures. They were born from the ether, with no weakness, no blood, no fatigue, and with no fear. With the flute nigh playing, they expanded again, showing a strange ice blue. The bodies became mistier as if they would melt into the fog. "Do not hide, Mr. Wolf Flute, in the rain fog," the rain artist suddenly growled. With a flashing light, the wall was split, the stones collapsed, dirt flew everywhere. In the dust, the shadow of Wolf Flute was finally revealed. A piece of the iron cut through the wall and barely missed his throat, leaving him with a striking bloodstain. Wheelchair. The rain artist took a big step forward. When did this happen? Iron whistled past. Like a strong crossbow with bursting arrows, the iron converged into a tornado and charged ahead. Wolf Flute's body suddenly tilted. The two wheels of the wheelchair slid on the ground. It made a full circle then backed away. The iron rain went right past him and left a honeycomb-like hole on the wall, causing the shingles from the structure to fly away. "Wow, you don't say," Wolf Flute cocked his eyebrow and patted the armrest of the wheelchair. "This thing is easy to use, and it is good for my laziness. It's super convenient. I'm falling in love with it. Keep your playful words and go to hell with them." The rain artist lifted his withered face. In his dark eyes, his white pupils started to shrink. "No more nonsense." He lifted his clarinet to his lips, playing a sharp tune. The white fog suddenly trembled, boiling over, and the color turned scarlet, like blood. Blood red. Breath of boiling blood. Wolf Flute opened his mouth like an animal and ground his teeth. Music that requires blood as sacrifice really fits the style of your evil cult. A sharp and mournful performance suddenly turned to a higher pitch, with red fog swirling, countless raindrops colliding, and the sound of friction like a roar of thunder. With this thunder, suddenly there were 6 burning flashes. It was a very thin and sharp iron piece. They had the speed of arrows in the rain, swung with a trill, like an evil spirit screaming. This was the exploding iron that should have only been single shots. Mixed in with the rain, they could launch as one with the shape of a fan, and no one would be able to escape it in this narrow space. But now there were 6 of them. Even Wolf Flute, who had seemed nonchalant, felt pins and needles in his scalp. The breath of boiling blood, this evil technique, sometimes did make one, King jealous. How come there were no such techniques for the musicians of religious disciples? Even if they were not allowed to use other people's blood, they could at least use their own. Wolf's eyes were envious. 6 shots each time. The rain artist must have paid a hefty price for this. Unfortunately, whether he was insane, or was just trying to show a great respect for his enemy by displaying such elaborate combat, it would be extremely tough to fight back. After all, when he was sneak-attacked from over 100 feet away, Wolf Flute had been heavily wounded by only one piece of the iron. And now, he was in a wheelchair with nowhere to escape. The humming in the air had given him chills. That was the sound of the hot iron ready to explode. Under such pressure, he started playing his flute, his scalp still numb. In an instant, the sound of the flute was crushed by the sharp noise of the wind and the sand blowing. Iron pieces flew out from the rain and the fog. The red-hot iron was suddenly released, and the terror of the kinetic energy and heat destroyed their body in a moment. It had turned to iron sand, that more dangerous than ever. The iron sand burned through the fog, firing forward, and pulling the bloody fog along with it. After what seemed like only a few seconds, hundreds of hot spikes flew out of the bloody fog into the slate and the walls, instantly turning them into pieces. The remaining heat was spreading, setting off a pale water vapor. In the water vapor, you could hear the scream of the silver wolves. "I really am a genius. Ha 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 ha." With 6 silver wolves pulling the wheelchair with all their strength, it broke out of the fog like a sleigh on the snow. Wolf Flute, with blood covering half of his body, cackled. He sat firmly in the wheelchair that was about to completely break down. No one ever thought this psycho would be able to turn his wheelchair into a sleigh at the very last minute, allowing him to escape from the 6 fan-shaped iron fires. In the speedy wheelchair, Wolf Flute sighed. He removed a pendant-shaped bottle hung around his neck. He removed the cork with his fingers and swallowed the whole bottle of liquid. As soon as the ice-blue liquid went inside him, he trembled. His skin turned pale. Blue and purple blood vessels expanded under his skin, intertwined with each other. The blood was pulsing with a rhythm. As if it were a beast was digesting the blood then releasing the burning flame. Wolf Flute's eye flashed vaguely for a moment that there seemed to be electricity firing through his eyes, too bright to look straight into. "Damn, this was a huge loss," Wolf Flute whispered. He took a deep breath as husky as the sound of the iron piece and started playing the flute. This time, there was a kind of power in the music, like an illusion entering reality, eroding through this fake world. It was an extremely cold night, but now, it felt maddeningly hot. Wind from the desert fell from the sky, destroying the cold rain. The humidity and poison in the air had been swept away by the wind. The sound of the flute spread like a sandstorm, giving the illusion of being under the burning sunlight. The sound of the stone's friction overpowered the cry from the demon of rain. A huge alpha wolf suddenly appeared beneath the moonlight. It was blurrier than his followers, but was also more strongly built. Like a reflection in water, it would soon disappear. It really disappeared. The rain artist paled and quickly retreated, but the alpha appeared again, right behind him. The rain artist's body trembled slightly. He looked down and saw a huge gap on his waist. It was a wound made by the alpha in what seemed like an instant. Under the moonlight, the alpha spat out the blood and organs and slowly looked back at him. Its translucent body seemed misty in the fog. "The underworld messenger," the rain artist murmured dazedly, the mournful scream cutting off. The alpha returned and disappeared. When he reappeared, its claws held a new piece of flesh and half a rib. It looked down arrogantly as if looking at its prey. The rain artist was defenseless. With the next re-emergence of the alpha wolf, the flesh tore again. The rain artist grasped his exposed organs and knelt on the ground. The war was over now. Chapter 14. Win or lose. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Forcefully turning the wolf into a phantom beast. Distortion of the rules, scepter level. Rain artist covered his fatal wounds. He looked as if he was both crying and laughing. "You have already reached this level. How old are you?" 20.4, 20.5. 20.3. Wolf Flute wiped the blood off his face, coldly sneering. "So how about it? Are you feeling hopeless seeing the difference between geniuses and mortals?" 20.3. I am already 40.7 years old, Rain artist mumbled to himself in shock. I have paid so much, and have even become a believer and follower of Hyakum. I've spent more than a decade to do so. But someone like you, why did you get to this level first? Why? Rain Artist raised his head stiffly. He was screaming, ignoring his tragic injury, I've given up so much. So much. I've already said so, Wolf Flute smiled fiercely like a wolf. Because I am a genius. He hit his own flute where Rain Artist could not see. Wolf Flute's face was blank. His fingers caressed the crack of the flute, but with twitching distress. Sure enough, he had tried too hard. Are you? Rain Artist stared at his eyes, then sneered suddenly as if he had seen the reflection of a man in his pupils. Then he realized and said, what an honor. I thought the genius had no weakness. Wolf Flute frowned indifferently, his fingers gently tapping. The silver wolf shouted under the moonlight and suddenly disappeared. The silver wolf snuck into the air, biting at the enemy's throat. Over there. Rain Artist suddenly threw out an exploding iron. Blood aura mixed together with the iron in his hand so that the iron issued a terrible scream. Strong water vapor whistled out from the exploding iron but in the direction the opposite of Wolf Flute. It was not trying to hit him, but in that moment, Wolf Flute felt rage burst from his brain. The exploding iron was directed towards the white-haired teen who laid unconscious in the corner. Rain Artist said he found Wolf Flute's weakness. Indeed, he had found it. Wolf Flute sighed with his eyes closed and waved. The silver wolf appeared from the air in a flash, and stopped in front of the juvenile. Grains of iron sand instantly crashed into its body. Silver blood burst out as the wolf screamed in agony, its eyes becoming crazier. Wolf Flute's body shook a bit. The wolf frantically rubbed its 4 claws, wanting to tear that damn enemy, but another burst of exploding iron hit its body like falling meteorites. Debris flew everywhere, scratching its eyes. Wolf Flute's body shook again. Mr. Genius, you should not look over there. You have looked so many times. You are very concerned about him, huh? Rain Artist laughed hoarsely until he could not breathe. He knelt down on the ground, coughing. He was in obvious pain but his voice remained condescending, no one would believe that a disciplined musician who could kill anyone without blinking an eye would care about a child's life. Huh, a genius like you should be a shame among disciplined musicians. Are you afraid that your bet is wrong? Wolf Flute's face was gloomy. But what if I win? It is fate. Rain Artist picked up the instrument in the pool of blood. After experiencing the overclocking load, the instrument which had accompanied him for years actually overheated. Ignoring the burning temperature, he grasped it, releasing another burst of exploding iron. Bam! Ednel.co in the wheelchair, Wolf Flute's body twitched, unable to move. Rain Artist looked back at his enemy. It's also my luck to meet a fool who bound a consumable like a phantom beast to his life. Wolf Flute could no longer speak, and lowered his head. Thick blood dripped from his wheelchair, converging on the ground in a puddle. I won, Rain Artist announced in a cold voice. Sensing its master dying, the alpha wolf angrily got up from the ground. Despite the immense trauma to its body, it rushed toward Rain Artist. 3 bursts of exploding iron could not solve the problem. Phantom wolves are really too troublesome. Rain Artist frowned and put the clarinet to his lips. The sharp, high-pitched voice caused the fog to spread out. Countless mournful roars synchronized with the terrible performance. The sound was like a long knife painfully scratching one's eardrums. In the madness of the fog, the blasting resulted in condensation again. 1, 2, 3. 6. 6 bursts of exploding iron released hot red, lethal light that could make anybody's scalp go numb. Then, boom. For a short moment, Rain Artist could not hear anything. His vision turned dark in front of his eyes, only a vague ray of light could be seen. He moaned in pain. Lowering his head, he looked at his hands that they had been broken by the clarinet's explosion. Blood dripped from the broken wrist emerged. He looked up at the moonlight, revealing his torn face, his jaw hanging on his neck, and blood dripping. Amongst the bloody flesh, only a withered eyeball remained, blinking in a daze. The wolf which rushed to him earlier had disappeared without a trace. It had long been dying but had fought until the very last moment. Rain Artist sharply screamed, "Wolf flute!" He roared, "Wolf flute!" The error of the instrument leads to the error of the control, a husky voice whispered amidst Rain Artist's roars. And the error of the control makes the ether uncontrollable. When the ether is out of control, it will bring devastating consequences. What Wolf Flute said was correct. The white-haired teen who had been unconscious opened his eyes, quietly staring at Rain Artist with bloodshot eyes. "You lost," he said. Feeling faint, it was difficult for Yi Qingxian to open his eyes. His skull felt like it had been hammered and was buzzing. The disturbance of any noise made him dizzy enough to kneel on the ground. The power of musicians was incredible. Even the aftershocks were enough to destroy a person's sanity and resistance. He felt that his body was about to break. He had been at the brink of collapse when he was hit by a power strong enough to break a wall in the very beginning. Then, again in the middle of the confrontation between the two musicians, he was hit by a bunch of aftershocks, practically knocking him out. Fortunately, the last shock woke him up. He felt like a nightmare. His internal organs crazily beating each other, but his body did not listen to his call. He could not move. "I lost." Rain Artist gaped at him with dismay. He looked down at the debris on the ground and vaguely mumbled, "You did something to my instrument. It's supposed to be complete." "Yeah, but you did not notice that there was a part inside missing inside." Yi Qingxian raised his hand in difficulty. On his fingertip, a slender reed reflected the moonlight, illuminating his pupils like flowing water. "I always felt that it will be too dangerous to return the complete instrument to you, but Wolf Flute said that you would notice it if we destroyed it. So I thought I could give it to you but..." He coughed in a low voice and softly laughed, "Just needed to replace it with a needle spring." Yi Qingxian dropped the reed to the ground. The simple movement had already caused him great pain. "We used your original spare part, soaked it in strong acid, then carved a very shallow incision." The juvenile gestured with 2 fingers. "It is simply a slight incision. In a rush, people will not notice the sound changes. The only flaw is that the high heat and intense vibrations make it easy to break." "From the beginning." Rain Artist staggered, approaching him with his face convulsing. "You planned it from the beginning." "No, I am the only person who knows the defect of Demon of Rain. Only I should know it." "Maybe." Yi Qingxian lowered his eyelids, "I had almost forgotten. Demon of Rain truly is strong. Its offensive power and impact on the environment are both extraordinary, but it does not mean that it doesn't have flaws. It can force the extraction of all the heat from the fog as explosive power, which upgrades the small effect of throwing items with destructive lethality. But this means that the load of the instrument is 10 times that of other music. Once out of control, all the heat will explode in an instant." Rain Artist roared, but his jaw finally fell to the ground. Blood dripped from his body non-stop. His body was quickly decaying. What had already been taken away by Satan now disappeared again. He fell to the ground, feeling his vitality quickly leaving him. If the world was a table for the satanic god Hyakum, then the so-called believers were just the pepper and salt. Since the pepper on Hyakum's table would soon expire, it only made sense to eat him now. "Eat it up, eat it up." "No, it should not be like this. I came following your command." "Why?" Rain Artist struggled in the pool of blood with his shattered body. He crawled forward with difficulty. His one-eyed vision fell on Yi Qingxuan's body. His eyes glistened. "The body, yes. I need a new body. This is your promise." This is your promise of my reincarnation. I still have hope. I got the approval of God. He laughed as if to comfort himself, but only to send an empty voice. In his broken right hand, the last remnants of 2 fingers tried to hold a leech-like worm. He crawled through the pool of blood toward Yi Qingxian. The body, give me a new body. Yi Qingxian tried to hold up his body, but was powerless. He smelled the stench from the blood. The quickly rotting rain artist had finally clutched his legs, smiling in ecstasy. Body, body. Yi Qingxian turned pale. He took out half of the dagger from his sleeve with trembling fingers. Victor had given it to him for self-defense before he left. He did not expect that it would become his last straw. Arm trembling, he held the dagger to this evil old man in front of him. But in Rain Artist's eyes, he could not see the fear and frustration, but only joke-like contempt and ridicule. What do you have in your hand? A toy. Rain Artist opened his cracked mouth, as if he were laughing. Then he raised his hands and snapped his fingers. His fingers were broken, but the snapping sound was like a hammer hitting Yi Qingxuan's hands. Crunch. Yi Qingxuan's wrist suddenly dislocated, and the dagger flew out from his hand and broke into iron pieces in the pool of blood. Kid, do not be afraid, and do not resist me. Rain Artist looked at Yi Qingxuan's pupils, laughing with ecstasy. It will only take a short while to complete the will transfer. Yi Qingxian grinded his teeth, heavily breathing, and did not say anything. He wanted to escape, but the wall was behind him. He was cornered. Through the whole process he only miscalculated one thing, Rain Artist's desperation at death. This mistake could not be remedied. Rain Artist screamed once again because the cold worm drilled into his left eye, digging out his flesh and blood. And then it stretched out the other end of its suction cup, crawling on Yi Qingxuan's chest, quickly going towards his pupil. Great, there was a hope for rebirth. Rain Artist was overjoyed. Do not resist, but accept God's reward. Good boy, we can go together to the peak of the musicians. He was incoherent in his ecstasy. Aren't you excited? I will always remember you, young man. What is your name? Where are you from? Why do you not talk? You must be too nervous. It does not matter, as I will forgive you. We'll be best friends, you know. Yi Qingxian was too terrified to speak. He just looked at Rain Artist's back, like watching the best thing in the world. The longer he was watching, the more he could not help but laugh. He is not your best friend, a hoarse voice came from Rain Artist's back, stunning him. Rain Artist finally saw the reflection through Yi Qingxuan's pupil. There was a yellow old dog standing in a pool of blood. Next to the old dog there was a blonde-haired teen looking livid, forcing down his fear. In Rain Artist's sight, the teen raised the iron bar in his hand, which had been used to close the door, raised it up and slammed it down. I am. Crack. Rain Artist's skull dented. He fell to the ground. His expression stiffening, he gaped at the crazy teen. He tried to say something, but Victor raised the iron bar, and then bam. Bang. 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 Rain Artist's skull dented with every blow. His last gaze was full of despair. He said with difficulty, wait, I. Bang. Victor delivered the final blow expressionlessly. Blood splattered onto his face, staining his green eyes. After a crisp sound, all fell silent. Chapter 15 Moonlight. You are listening at novelfull.audio. When Wolf Flute awoke, he was laying in the same bed as before, only it had been converted into an operating table. He could not feel his own body. He felt like he was floating in the air. A sense of happiness wandered through this head. Although he felt no pain, the feeling of euphoria, seemingly out of nowhere, was rather confusing and unsettling. Mandala. Wolf Flute whispered, Father, isn't the amount of injection you gave me a little too much? At least you still have a sense of reasoning, and can talk as well. In the candlelight, the chanting priest turned and looked back at him. When you were brought back here, you were not exactly in one piece. In order not to let you die from pain, I had to use all of my mandala. Really tough, huh? But can an ordinary priest perform a surgery with this level of difficulty? Moreover, an ordinary church should not have surgery equipment and this many drugs. The priest ignored him. Wolf Flute raised his head slowly, and saw that his chest had numerous stitches. He sighed softly, since I am alive, does that means the rain artist is dead? Isn't he right next to you? Wolf Flute was stunned by the priest's words. He turned to the other side and let out a cry, almost falling out of bed. Right next to his pillow, there was a large glass container. With a repulsive smell of the antiseptic liquid, a dry, deformed body was soaking in the container. It was as if all the water had been drained. A deformed body curled into the fetal position, but no baby was nearly as horrible as this. Is that your way of getting revenge on me? Wolf Flute said bitterly, are you from the hunter's tribe? How did you turn him into this? He became like this after he died. The priest reached over, took the bottle from him, and made a gesture to throw it away. It seems that I was too sentimental. If you do not need it, I can throw it away. I was wrong. Please forgive me. This thing is rather ugly, but worth a lot of money from the musician unions. Wolf Flute pouted and begged for mercy. Saliva dripped down from his mouth that he looked like an idiot. My instrument cannot be repaired otherwise. Those people from the Cavendish laboratory won't even let me in the door without money. The priest looked down at the wreckage in the bottle and suddenly asked, the funding you promised that child is also part of this. Wolf Flute was stunned, how did you know? When you were talking last night, I was listening outside. Since when? Since the beginning. Until you said, in order to compensate him as a bait, for the danger he may encounter, I will financially support him to study to be a musician. Were you not curious whether or not he agreed? The priest gave him another look, as if he was an idiot, and said nothing. Well, he agreed. Wolf Flute shrugged, if it wasn't for him this time, I might have died. The priest shook his head, you had a wolf king who could control the ether. You might not have lost. The teacher gave me that. Thanks to his foresight, I was able to scare the rain artist, but I still paid a hefty price. It's better to be alive than anything else. Why don't you rest now? Father Ban got up, ready to leave, but after a moment of silence he whispered, there will be a carriage to take you away the day after tomorrow. I will go with you to pick up that item tomorrow. It is kept very well. I hope you can use it properly. He took one last look at Wolf Flute, left the room, and shut the door. In silence, there was only Wolf Flute. After a long time, he scratched his head and sighed softly, as long as it was used, there's no such thing as proper anymore. Yi Qingxian had another dream. He dreamed of the distant past, but different from what he had remembered. It had seemed to be from someone's fantasy. Beginning with the sound of the rain, he came into the dream. He was once again in the streets of Avalon, crowded as always. A familiar sound of piano playing came from somewhere, it was a voice from his first memories. They were like hands, guiding him towards a deeper world of dreams. In the raging crowd, he saw a man carrying a piano case. He looked very young, so it must have been many years ago. His robe floated in the wind, flying like a crane. His long silver hair was not tied in a knot like most of the Easterners. He simply put it up with a hairpin. Strange but simple. So that group of old men from the holy city called me Chant of Month, probably thought I was the expert against a heretic. But whichever way you look at it, my son is a bit more of a genius than I am, right? The man looked down at his son. The child was just curiously gazing at his surroundings. The child's face was so familiar, it gave Yi Qingxian a headache, but he still could not remember who he was. Yi Qingxian was standing in the middle of the crowd, staring and confused. Dad, I want that. The child raised his hand and pointed to the balloon in the hands of a pedestrian. Well, okay, Daddy will buy you one, but do not tell your mother, okay? The man carrying the piano case teased his kid, and walked right past Yi Qingxian. Yi looked back, and saw the child in the arms of the man, gazing with innocent eyes. In the crowd, the child looked back at him. Their eyes met for an instant, like a door had been opened. Their eye contact made Yi Qingxian take a step back. He fell to the ground stunned, feeling as if he were inside out. The child looked just like him when he was young. Had he ever been this happy? He wanted to laugh. The piano music started again. It had frozen the raging crowd. The wind had begun from the end of the dream. It had fallen from the sky, and blew away the whole city. Yi Qingxian was struggling in the wind, unsure of where to go. At his fingertips, the cord was restored to a shining string, pulling him deep inside of the wind tunnel. He floated in the wind. Yi, have you dreamed before? The man carrying the piano case whispered in his ear. Yi Qingxian looked around blankly. He heard a young voice answering instead, is that one of those things happens after falling asleep? Maybe, but you can also dream when you're awake. The guy carrying the piano case laughed gently, his voice soft and low, like the clear resonance of tapping jade together. You will forget the dreams you had when you were sleeping, but the ones you had when you were awake, they will continue in your dreams. And the whole world will become a dream. That's beautiful, right? Yi Qingxian was stiff. He looked back at the man with the piano case. A pain out of nowhere made him keel over. He held his head, feeling bursts of pain. This world is a nightmare, father. He roared, it is all because of you. And you think of it as a beautiful dream. Mother died. She died because of you. The Eastern man was shocked. He seemed to have finally remembered, staring at Yi with blurry eyes, complicated and sad. The music, smooth as silk, was interrupted for a moment. Like sharp scissors had shredded it into pieces and left a mess everywhere. The wind had stopped, the dust was gone, the sun went out, the earth was broken, and everything had collapsed. The darkness encapsulated everything, and he fell into the abyss. The broken piano music was like a hand, tightly holding onto him. The dreams were changing dramatically. Sometimes a flooded city, and sometimes a castle ready to collapse. Sometimes it was a raging sea with a jungle growing in it, with neon flashing at the horizon. In the next instant, they changed again, now dim. Infinite fog was rising, drowning everything. The piano started again. As the moon sang, the clouds moved in the sky. Yi Qingxian was walking in the fog, looking for the music. At his feet, the rough mountain road was rising, but was becoming narrower and more difficult to walk on. The fog wrapped around him. As if numerous eyes were quietly watching him, it made Yi feel not so alone walking this path. He kept walking in the mountains. Forward, forward, forward until there was no place to go. The next step would be to the abyss. The music came from the end of the sky, broken yet persistent as if it were calling him. Yi Qingxian quietly staring at the fog and took a step forward. The abyss did not devour him because of the invisible music lifting him. He stepped into the wind and began to move forward, faster and faster. Sometimes he looked around, staring at the dancing clouds. In the fog and the sea of dot clouds, only stars shined like broken lights around him, like a fish in the fog. Flashes of light passed by him, then disappeared. He began to feel calm, no longer afraid. Then the dot clouds split in front of him. Layers of mist and clouds exited from both sides, revealing a dark sky with stars flashing above. Ahead of the clouds, a moon was rising silently, illuminating his path. With a crushing sound of the music, immeasurable rays of light rose from the star-filled sky, up and down again. Misty tunes lingered in the clouds between heaven and earth, turning into bits of bright light. In the moonlight, he saw the man waiting quietly. He was standing in a distance, unreachable. Yi Qingxian could not catch up with him. Staring in silence, he saw the shadow of Yi Qingxian, then laughed and gently waved. His body was swinging with his wave, as if dissipating. How do you like it? He looked at the boy, a beautiful dream. Is this a trick, father? Yi Qingxian stared at him, but I do not think it's beautiful. I am scared of it. Yi, this was a dream of your past. You were just remembering. I forgot already. Yi Qingxian turned around, not wanting to see it again. Things that have been forgotten would not have appeared here. He whispered in the moonlight, things that cannot be forgotten may be painful, but this was your dream, how could you forget? Yi Qingxian was stunned. He looked around at his dream world, watching the sea of clouds and the moonlight. He suddenly felt lost and sad. What should I do? In silence, the man laughed, as gentle as the moonlight. Weren't you planning on going forward? He said, just like that, not arrogantly floating in the sky or falling down because of the pain. Just go forward, straight ahead, and nothing in this world can stop you. Whether it leads you to heaven or hell, straight to the end of the dream. The young man looked at his black eyes, the same color as his own, seemed to have 1,000 words in them, but also seemed vague. So, do not forget, Yi. In the moonlight, Yi stared at the young man, sighing. His feelings were complicated, but he was mostly sad. Gradually, the man disappeared onto the moon, only the wind carried his final whisper, I'll be there waiting for you. Chapter 16 True or False. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Yi Qingxian opened his eyes. It was afternoon. The warm sun shone through the opened windows upon his body. He felt the fatigue for the first time in a long time, but it felt so good. There was no pressure, or any unbearable pain either. There was just a peace and comfort in his heart. You're awake. The father who was reading at the table raised his head and said coldly, I couldn't expect you to recover that quickly since you came back half dead last night. My father had said before that cheap life was easy to support. Yi Qingxian laughed, struggling to sit up. God was probably not willing to accept a liar like me. Do not speculate about God. The priest did not continue arguing with him, only giving him a warning, then went back to his reading. The afternoon sunshine on Yi Qingxuan's body felt warm and soft, making his pale face feel much better, almost soothing him back to sleep again. After a long time, he heard Father Ban's unexpected voice, Did you have a nightmare? No. Yi Qingxian thought for a moment, but could not help laughing, I haven't had such a good dream for a long time. It doesn't sound like a lie. It looked like you were recovering well. The priest nodded and suddenly said, Go and see Victor. He is in his original room. What's up with him? He has been hiding in his room since he came back last night, and didn't want to talk to anyone. He felt guilty regarding you. You should talk to him. The priest paused and said, You both are fools, so you should be able to understand one another. Since geniuses had a mutual understanding amongst themselves, there should be a common language between fools too. The priest's words were right that the world was always grouped together. The wealthy drank with the wealthy in their mansions, while the homeless hugged each other in the snow. The lonely people shared loneliness with each other, while the people in pain licked each other's wounds. Victor said that Yi Qingxian was his only friend, as Yi Qingxian was Victor's only friend. One was holding on to the dream of becoming the musician and never letting go. The other one imagined becoming a big shot and seeking revenge against the aristocracy for killing his family members. The guy who was already a street boy always believed that he would become a bigger one, so he was ready at all times to challenge authority or whatever else. Treating others as he wanted to be treated, he felt Yi Qingxian was his only friend. This way no one could call him cheap. Even His Majesty would not be allowed to do that. The entire time he felt that he would have a great future, and there was nothing in this world that could stop him. He was naive and stubborn. But when Yi Qingxian saw Victor so anxious and sad, unkempt and curled up in the corner, he did not look like the big man he wanted to be. When Yi Qingxian sat next to him, Victor looked at him for a long time before he finally recognized him. "Oh, Yezi, are you awake?" Victor asked, trying to smile. Yi Qingxian looked at his messy bed, shaking his head. "You didn't sleep." "I couldn't fall asleep feeling like someone was looking at me. There was the feeling of murder in this room." "Yezi." Victor looked at the empty corner, as if he could see the invisible evil spirits. His green eyes were vicious, hunting for the enemy, ready to kill. "Is he looking at me?" "He is dead, Victor." Yi Qingxian whispered, "He will not appear outside the window. Everyone only lives once. Once someone is dead, he is really dead. He died." Victor looked back at him. The viciousness in his eyes gradually faded, like finally relaxing a whole night of confrontation. He whispered, "Is he really dead?" Yi Qingxian nodded slowly. "So it is," Victor said. Victor suddenly realized that all his hardships were gone. He leaned against the wall and softly laughed. "Yes, I killed him, I had forgotten. As I said before, you don't know how to fight, so every time you have to rely on me. When old Phil was looking for me, I knew that it was not good. So I did pretty good, right?" He smiled, but the fear beneath his smile was not completely concealed. That it was a fear that could never be rid of. "Yes, you did very well." Yi Qingxian nodded. "Of course. I'm a bad spawn, and not even murder could stop me." He whispered, "I am a big man and will be successful, right?" Yi Qingxian kept silent, patting Victor's shoulder. Victor looked at him, smiling as he teared up, both embarrassed and sad. Like a little bully who had just gotten beaten up, his tears were cheap. "But at that time, why did I not stand out? I was supposed to be the bait. I should have been who went, but I was afraid." "Yezi, you are not afraid. You've suddenly asked me this question, but I can't answer now." Yi Qingxian scratched his head and grasped Victor's shoulders. "You do not have to be sad because of what happened. I was not as brave as you think. Yezi, are you trying to comfort me?" Victor gazed at him. "I do not need comforting." He did not finish his words because he saw no sympathy nor the slightest mercy in the white-haired teen's eyes. "No one can always say beautiful words, Victor. Those beautiful things are just for camouflage." Yi Qingxian whispered, "I am more afraid than you are, but I have been used to it. When I was very young, I knew that if I died, no one would remember me. So I had to work hard to live, but with more effort to live, the more I feared death. It's much easier to die than live. 5 years ago, after I wandered here, the priest adopted me. I thought I could live. I thought that by living, I could do anything. I could act like a good boy, studying hard to learn to spell. But the most important reason in my heart was not to repay them or help other people. It was for myself." Yi Qingxian paused and started laughing, but it was self-deprecating. "This includes the time I stood up and asked Mr. Wolf Flute to let me replace you, so that he would owe me, and help me become a musician to go back to Avalon. It was that simple. Sometimes I think about the kind of person I am and feel very ashamed. Victor, I have done so much. Maybe part of it was to help other people, but ultimately, it was for myself." He stroked the ring on his finger. "Maybe I was such a person, but because I had nothing, I wanted more. If I really wanted something, I would not care about my life. I would rush to any opportunity, feeling like a dog yearning for food. Sometimes I felt that being a dog was not a bad thing. As long as that allowed me to get the things I wanted, I could do anything. Anything." Yezi evaluated himself quietly, as if he had cleaned the dusty mirror that he had looked at before, now able to see his true reflection. His tone was complex and solemn. Saying those words was like betting against fate everything he had in his life. "Victor, I want to be a musician. In the long silence, Victor stared at him as if this were the first time he was seeing him. After pausing for a moment, he suddenly softly laughed, "So you are really evil, Yezi. Did you really say that?" Yi Qingxian was stunned for a moment. Suddenly, he became angry and kicked Victor in his side. "I have said so much, and tried to comfort you." Victor was being tossed around on the floor by Yi Qingxuan's kicks, but could not help laughing, as if he was laughing at Yezi. "Go away. I will pretend that my kindness was eaten by old Phil." Yi Qingxian snappily kicked the door and left, but Victor was still laughing. After a while, the awakened old Phil ran into the door, looking for something to eat. But he only saw Victor was still laughing so hard almost could not breathe. The kind of laughter was embarrassing and sounded like it came from a petty man, but Victor still felt that he was a big man. Downstairs, the priest looked up in silence, and after a long time nodded. "It's all right now. Really simple." Wolf Flute sighed. "Should it be said that it was easier to communicate between the kids? No, it's a fool who only believes in silly words." It was midnight. The black moon hung high, while the wind howled. In the backyard of the church, the two figures walked out of the room carrying shovels and walked through the streets. One of them was tall and thin without facial expressions. The other's footsteps were staggered, like he had just been injured recently. They walked all the way through the town quietly, and finally stopped at the iron fence in front of the cemetery. The tall and thin priest took a rusty copper key off of his neck and unlocked the huge iron lock. The iron gate was pushed open with a sharp sound as it had not been opened for a long time. "Do you really want to hide the stuff in the cemetery?" Wolf Flute held the shovel and whispered, "Will it become rotten from the moisture and the corpses?" "The last priest told me that the thing was well preserved and should not be broken," the priest said. "Hey, we entrusted such important things to the custody of the church. You should at least confirm. First, that thing was handed over to the cleric to seal. You did not say which day you would get it back. Second, if every priest chose to look at the thing, then there would be no secret. Why don't I think you're right?" Father Ban looked back at him again, like looking at an idiot's eyes. In the dark, Father Ban carried the light, leading the way ahead. They walked on the soft, wet soil, passing by the tombstones. Wolf Flute was injured, not able to walk fast, so he still had the privilege of reading the epitaph of each tombstone. Oh, what a miserable story. This person was killed because he discovered his wife's affair. Wait. His wife is here. Why is the adulterer here? Plus his 2 dogs. What is that? Father, I could make up a story with hundreds of thousands of words. Nonsense. The priest wrote him off. Come on, we're almost there. In the end, they stopped in front of a very old tombstone. Behind the pale tombstone, the cross had been broken, and the writings had been faded over time by the wind and rain. The priest looked down at the writing, and used the shovel to get rid of weeds in front of the grave and nodded. "It's here. You can start digging." Wolf Flute tentatively started digging, feeling the dull pain from his wound. Without any resistance from the mud, it made him feel at ease. But the muddy soil was obviously cold, and also had gravel on the top. It seemed like an invisible ghost was staring at them in the dark, watching them dig the graves. It seemed to envelop them with cold air. The ghost waited to be dug out, and then let the people lie in the tomb. Whose tomb is this? Wolf Flute trembled a little bit. I always feel like we will dig up wraiths. Chapter 17 Bones of the Perished. You are listening at novelfull.audio. This tomb belongs to the one before the previous priest, Ban said in a cold voice. He jumped after he had gotten drunk. He had internal bleeding and died the next day. Rest assured, even if the avenging spirit did exist, he'd have gone drinking instead of come looking for you. Hey, are you encouraging me to dig the grave of the previous secret protector? Fine, you don't have to, Ban muttered. Wait, I will. I will. Wolf Flute continued digging bitterly. With the surgery and the medicine, his heavy injury had healed but had left him with very serious side effects. He would receive more advanced treatment once he returned to the holy city. Now he was sweating all over, regretting that he had not done much physical work during his years in the holy city, otherwise he would not be panting already. Digging and digging, the sound of the shovel became rhythmic. He tried to make it less boring. Wolf Flute began to sing, 1 little, 2 little, 3 little Indians. 4 little, 5 little, 6 little Indians. Just before Father Ban's tolerance reached his limit and killed him for singing such horrible songs, Wolf Flute finally heard the sound of the shovel hit the sarcophagus. He was excited and started to dig harder. He had soon cleared a majority of the dirt on top of the coffin. Seeing that he was almost done, the priest pushed Wolf Flute away. He took out a crowbar from his sleeve and put it under the crack of the opening, struggling to open it. With the sound of the nails breaking, the coffin was cracked slightly, then opened entirely. Wolf Flute was stunned. He did not smell anything unpleasant, instead he smelled church incense which made him quite uneasy. The priest lit the lantern and swept the top of the coffin. Wolf Flute was only able to see the bones, like the blooming stone flowers, but he barely saw much else. A surge of wind blew in from the sky and swept away the dark clouds. The moon shone above. In the gloomy moonlight, the body in the sarcophagus appeared to smile at the two guests. The priest had a cold look on his face, and Wolf Flute gasped with surprise, "What the f***ck is that thing?" Inside the 100-year-old coffin, everything was covered in scarlet. There were spider lilies in full blossom. They grew out of the bones, with a smell of an extravagant incense, enchanting and seductive. Underneath the layers of spider lilies, the bones that would only exist in nightmares were finally exposed. On the seemingly grinning black skull, in addition to the normal 2 eye sockets, there were 2 additional gaps, as if there used to be 2 more eyes in them. A skeleton over 3 meters tall was lying in the coffin, 6 arms crossed. 2 hands with open palms on top, fingers crossed, posing like flames. 2 hands laid on top of the chest, its fingers closed together like a lotus. 2 hands, with fingers crossed like chains with an iron lock. Under the 6 arms, something was guarded. Where the rib cage had been now had many layers of lamellae, the barbs above had all been broken. A pair of torn wing bones extended from the back to the front. Although it had become bone, it was still covered with a bronze layer. A frantic feeling filled the coffin like a demon's burial ground. Even when dead, it still felt as if he would leap out of the coffin and fly towards the moonlight. This was not a human corpse. It more like a monster made of black iron, bronze and silver, only existing in a craftsman's nightmare. Wolf Flute took out the shovel, expressionless. He poked the bones which seemed to have been made of alloy. The sound of the metal colliding produced a very low buzz, numerous souls in the darkness echoed in return. He held the shovel and froze. As a gust of wind blew, the shovel in his hands silently disintegrated into powder. The iron residue drifted through the air, seeming to have pierced the heart with every breath, giving him chills all over. The Curse of Ravages. It was a curse created by the musicians of the modification department. The music was engraved into the bones. Even the smallest disturbance would cause the ether to backfire, turning all those who touched the bones to ashes. Wolf Flute tilted his head and looked at Ban. "Hey, Father, when the people of your church were drunk, did they all turn into something like this?" "Ah, I was just trying to scare you. I only wanted to see your expression." The priest casually revealed the truth, as if he had done nothing wrong. He looked at the bones with a cold stare. Before he died, he was not human. Just treated as a body of the beast. "What now?" Wolf Flute asked. "The 2 of us stay here and wait a few decades until the curse of ravages has dissipated. The sarcophagus and the cemetery are connected. Unless the cemetery was dug entirely out of the ground, the curse of ravages will not dissipate." The priest turned around to look at him, putting his hands out. "Show me your letter of appointment." Wolf Flute was surprised for a moment. He scrambled through his bag and took out a piece of paper as red as blood. The paper had a pear watermark from the church as an anti-counterfeit mark. The priest put the paper in front of the lantern, turned it to the side. A few numbers were revealed where the red stains had been. S7.6.3242, what kind of code is this? Wolf Fong asked. The authorized ciphertext, issued by the Cardinal Hall of the Sacred City. The believers are allowed to use divine power with this. S is the abbreviation of the angel Seraph, meaning the first sequence under the throne. 7 is the number representing the burning snake. A power to eliminate all evil. This is power given to me by the Cardinal Hall of the Sacred City. Followed by a 1-time ciphertext, which can be interpreted by us. The priest explained this casually, and took out an old clock from his inner pocket. The clock was a size of 2 fists, more like a large bell, but much more solemn than a bell. It was very old, engraved with lines of spells, and a crest of the 3 saints. Under the moonlight, the brass bell shone silently. Then the priest sounded the bell with a complex rhythm. It was quiet at first, then suddenly felt like someone let out a breath. Suddenly, countless bats started screaming, shattering the silence. They flew toward the sky in panic, aimlessly flying about, so frightened they died running into the tombstones and the walls. The sound, unbearable to the human ear, had spread like water dropped into a quiet lake. Ripples spread in all directions. Suddenly it reached tens of millions of miles away, so many miles away in the holy city, a huge dark bell sounded in response. Then the clock in the hands of the priest broke, silently turning into iron sand in the moonlight. It poured down from the hands of the priest like water and dissipated into the air. Wolf Flute suddenly turned pale. The light from the iron sand had emerged. A huge amount of ether formed together. Amid the dust swirling, the holy object revealed itself in the iron sand. It was a rare sword. Its body was made of lapis lazuli, its blade full of gaps and cracks. On the back of the sword remained traces of forging, almost like layers and layers of the blooming peonies. If you looked carefully, each layer was filled with numerous holy names and scriptures. At the hilt of the sword, for generations of popes left their names and the emblem of the tricyclic, proving that God had the power to grant this weapon. When it was used, it would break everything like shattering a china pot. The emblem and the scripture were filled with endless power. The power turned the body of the sword scarlet red. The edge of the sword shook non-stop, and a fuzzy shadow was revealed. Upon calling of the prayer, the divine power shall arise. I will fill the river and let it run endlessly, the priest recited, holding the hilt, letting the flame's power burn himself. My lord, for you. He clenched his sword and held it high. There was silence, as if they were frozen by an invisible power. Then the blade came down. The silence was broken. The sword came down with a burning burst, like a quick flash that tore apart the lights and the shadows, impossible to look at directly. The bones in the coffin were shaking violently. On top of the bones, the scarlet-red spider lilies quivered. They blossomed, danced, and in an instant, turned into dust and flew away. Dust mixed with the petals, red as blood in the moonlight. They continued to fly out of the sarcophagus and spread into the cold wind like a group of blood-colored butterflies. And yet the sword continued to stab downward against the bloody butterflies. Finally it collided against the bones, the blade and the bones started shaking and screaming, as if they were being burned in a furnace together. The sounds were terrifying yet harmonious. Soon the sound disappeared, as did the blade, then the butterflies. Everything was like a dream. It was as if nothing had happened. Wolf Flute had his head down, but could not keep his eyes off of the bones in the sarcophagus. Inside the sarcophagus, the 6 arms slowly stretched open. The chest bone plate expanded like flower petals, revealing what was hidden inside a box made of black iron. The curse of the ravages was broken by the sword from thousands of miles away. Remembering the light, Wolf Flute felt goosebumps all over him. It was a power extracted from the source, daunting even if it was just a mirror image of what was left of it. That sword that is it, the kingdom of heaven forged by 4 generations of the popes. Yes. Father Ban withdrew the empty hand. The cipher text was the real key. Without it, you can't open the cage of the bones. The technique of the church was really amazing. Wolf Flute sighed and pointed to the corpse in the sarcophagus, and this. What is this? Did I not tell you? The secret keeper from the one before the previous generation. Ban had no expression. He was sent 100 years ago to the north to find the whereabouts of that thing, and he found it in the territory of the Dark Gaia. The Pope led a crusade against the natural disaster. Yes. It took the secret keeper 3 years to plan. He sacrificed 6 of his men to bring that thing back. He himself was eroded by the power of the natural disaster and began to go mad. He turned into this monster and forgot who he was. In order to kill him, the mission dispatched 6 knights of the Holy Temple. He finally died by the hands of my father. He had become a vengeful spirit, but he still recognized his own children. He saw my father and relaxed and curled up by the fire, had some food, then fell asleep. He might have already known that there was iron sand in the food. The iron sand turned into a blade and stabbed his heart from the inside. In the end he did not resist, preserving his own dignity. It was a hefty price to pay. Wolf Flute was silent for a long time and sighed softly. Father Ban drew a holy emblem on his chest. His eyes were still cold. It's just one person's life and death. The fear of life and death was enough to respect. Why should the numbers matter? Wolf Flute bent down and held up the black box among the bones respectfully. He blew away the dust and ashes on top. Under the moonlight, he opened the lock on the box and reached inside. The expressions on his face kept changing. Finally he took a deep breath and nodded, yes, it's the same as what the teacher has described. He put away the box and slightly bent over to the priest, thanks to the church, my mission is done. This is my mission as well, and I thought I would die here from old age. I did not expect to be free today. In silence, the priest looked down at the sarcophagus. He stretched out his hand toward the bones and drew a shape of the holy emblem in the air, you are free. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust, time to go, no longer stay. Then the wind came from the sea, passed by the tips of everyone's nose, erasing the lingering rotten smell from the cemetery. In the tender wind, the hideous bones seemed to have calmed down, finding their eternal peace. Under the moonlight, the bronze wing bones reflected a glimmer of silver, sacred and solemn in its own way. It's beautiful. Wolf Flute took a final look, shoveled the earth on the ground, and covered its body. Chapter 18 Choice. You are listening at novelfull.audio. On the way back, Wolf Flute carried a crowbar. He hummed the 10 Little Indians nursery rhyme. He seemed relaxed and in a happy mood. Stumbling forward, his body twisted like he was drunk. Father Ban was still silent. His face was cold but showed no emotion, but Wolf Flute's heart still felt full of sorrow. Hey, Father, my mission is done and your mission is done too. Why are you so sad? At this time, shouldn't we need to have some drinks to celebrate? Wolf Flute scratched his hair, you are spacing out. What exactly are you thinking? You have completed the task the Lord and the Church assigned you. Soon you can leave here and return to the Church as a reincarnation, the glory crown has been kept for you. Are you worried that the crown is too small for you to wear? I was thinking about something. Some things need to be reconsidered, the priest said coldly. What's the matter? Wolf Flute pondered for a while then said, is it that little guy named Yi? You are training him as an apprentice, right? Now he's not going to go back to your training. Is that so? Your arrival disrupted all my plans, Mr. Wolf Flute. If you had not come, I could have at least let him replace me and return to the church as the knight of the temple, Father Ban said indifferently. Wolf Flute felt embarrassed but forced a dry laugh. You may be right, but you see, he did not want to be a little priest, and you should not force him to go that way. It was better than insisting on an unrealistic dream that would only lead to a dead end. Father Ban looked up at him. You rekindled the fire in his heart, Wolf Flute. I underestimated how dedicated he is to becoming a musician. This, you see, kids always have dreams, right? Wolf Flute tried to organize his words and explain, I do not understand rebelliousness or adolescence, but having a dream is a good thing. You cannot stop his dreaming. My meaning is that one day he will find it unrealistic. Wolf Flute nodded and made a conclusion, well, rest assured, he will give up sooner or later. Father Ban shook his head. You do not understand. Okay. A few years ago, the first time I saw him, he was barefoot, walking in the ice and snow. He had nothing, and was accompanied by his only dog, but he said that he wanted to go to Avalon. When I asked him what he was going to do, his eyes lit up. Bane recalled the street boy's appearance and the cold and snow from when he had first met Yi. The white-haired teenager dressed in broken coat, trembling, but speaking with the corners of his mouth tilted, lips open, the kind of eyes. They were shining. Wolf Flute was stunned and stopped his walking. Wow! Wolf Flute suddenly understood. He is an excellent child, so excellent that I have never seen anyone like him before. I said to him, if he wanted to become a musician, he must have good moral. Then he trained himself in accordance with the standards of the monks. I told him, if he wanted to become a musician, he needed to go through the best education, so he spent a month reading the entire library collection, and learning the advanced mathematical foundation and etiquette in just 2 months. In order to fight for the place to go to the sacred city, he taught himself the mechanical structures, helping maintain the town's lighthouse for 3 consecutive years. I do not know if anyone has taught him the basic theory of the music. He is familiar with all things about musicians. For so many years, he has been walking in that direction. The priest's voice got lower, he will soon realize he is far away from achieving his dream. So Wolf Flute, could you really let him give up that idea? Otherwise, the unachieved dream will make him drown in his despair one day. Wolf Flute kept quiet, but then suddenly burst into a relentless laughter. What are you talking about, father? Wolf Flute opened his mouth, patting his chest, the one who died for the dream is the happiest. The next day in the church reception room. Well, my friend, it is the time for you to choose. In silence, Wolf Flute lied on the couch and spread out his hands to the confused boy. I need you to make a choice about the agreement between us. Choice. What do you want me to choose? Yi Qingxian asked. Yes. You see, last night Father Ban and I discussed about you receiving the education to become a musician. Wolf Flute coughed a bit. Well, although you are only 17 years old, and not eligible to go to the university yet. Father said that you had studied reading, writing and mathematics. The exam should be no problem for you. You will be qualified enough to pass the exam at any time to become a teacher at church, so he has a suggestion. Because of Father's advice, I have made some changes to my original plan. Yi Qingxian was puzzled to see the priest, but the priest stood silently with no emotions. This is the case because the priest was recently promoted to a big title and received a big fortune, so he could do a lot of favors for others. Wolf Flute started talking non-stop. After seeing Father Ban's serious face, he stopped. Well, he can recommend you go to the sacred city as an internal member of the church. The current Trinity Theological College will enroll you without an entrance exam. This is the chorale musician's cradle. Once you graduate, your future will be bright. If you perform well, maybe you can also be selected for the holy choirs. Holy choirs. Yi Qingxian could not help but give a bitter smile. You should know that I couldn't even sing in the regular mass. It is okay. As long as there is a group of people singing, you just need to open your mouth. There is a saying in the East, be there just to make up the number. I used to cheat a lot while going through exams back in the day. You should be flexible. The priest coldly glared at him. Wolf Flute shut up, embarrassed. Yi Qingxian thought for a moment and suddenly asked, how about the other one? The top college in the Anglo Kingdom, the Royal Academy of Music in the capital of Avalon. My alma mater. But they probably would not admit you because I dropped out of school. Talking about it, Wolf Flute suddenly became enraptured. The academy was located in the city of Avalon, only 2 blocks from the center, green land, native scene, natural view, and luxury area. It is low-key yet high-end. If you like astronomy, there is an observatory on the left. If you like art, there is an opera hall on the right. If you like politics, the House of Commons is in the front. If you like crime, the prison is right behind the academy. How about it? Pretty happy and unexpected, right? Yi Qingxian was silent. Just a joke. Wolf Flute scratched his hair, but it really is good there because there is a variety of research available, and the academic atmosphere is also very strong. But getting you in will be tough. That I am not powerful enough, but I can ask my teacher for help. However, my teacher is very strict, and is never willing to open this back door. So he may only give you a letter of recommendation to take the entrance exam. You can pass the test, but then I have no way to continue to help you. That's it. Yi Qingxian nodded. The Royal Academy of Music, please. Thank you, Mr. Wolf Flute. So quick. Wolf Flute was surprised for a moment as he thought Yi Qingxian would choose Trinity Theological College, and did not think he would decide to go to Avalon. In silence, the priest nodded as he had expected Ye's decision. He got up and left, saying nothing. Wolf Flute looked at the priest walking away, scratching his head helplessly. Then I will write a letter to my teacher. Please be aware that my teacher has some power, but you have to get on the road tomorrow or else you will miss the admissions period. Yi Qingxian was stunned for a moment, deep in thought. Then he nodded, yes, tomorrow. Good. Wolf Flute hesitated to ask, that. Okay. Yi Qingxian noticed Wolf Flute's hesitance. Wolf Flute took a deep breath and released an irritated sigh. He looked back at the door making sure nobody was there, then lowered his voice and asked, why didn't you choose the Trinity Theological College? Stupid. Do you know that when the priest goes back this time, he will be promoted directly up another 3 levels? A bishop class member, plus the temple knight. With your special relationship, you could have a bright future, my friend. Why are you deciding to go to Avalon by yourself? And in the sacred city, most of the world's musicians are gathered there. The door is willing to open for all believers, even the tuition is free. The money you would save is enough to buy a custom-made instrument. Did you know that after I dropped of college, I sold my pants in order to buy a musical instrument? Yi Qingxian was stunned to hear Wolf Flute's rant. After a long time he could not help but laughing in a low voice. He shook his head and said, I'm sorry, Mr. Wolf Flute, I think you may be wrong from the beginning. Okay. I am not a believer. Okay. Wolf Flute could not help but exclaimed. He found himself lost, but quickly spoke, wait, what did you say? I am not a believer, Yi Qingxian repeated. I thought you were a clerk, but in the end you are not even a believer. Do you believe in the gods of the East? No. Yi Qingxian shook his head. I have never been to the East, nor do believe in God. I learned about him through reading and writing from the Father. The Father tried to baptize me many times, but I had rejected him. Why don't you believe it? Wolf Flute's face was twitching a little. Yi Qingxian suddenly pondered as he had never thought about this question before. After a long time, he finally understood a little. He softly replied, probably because God never saved my mother. Chapter 19 The Future You are listening at novelfull.audio. When Yi Qingxian came down from the reception room, he saw the priest sitting in the chair of the library, going through the holy command which he had started copying some days ago. The priest did not seem be concerned, yet one could see the sadness in him. Yi Qingxian came to his side and whispered an apology, "Sorry, father. I have disappointed you. I knew you're troublesome." Father Ban shook his head, "But you've really troubled me this time." "It has always been tough, father," Yi Qingxian laughed. "Putting up with me for so many years, it must have been hard on you." "Yes. As stubborn and vengeful as you were as a child, you'd give anyone a headache wherever you went." The priest said coolly, "Now I don't have to worry anymore, it will be so much easier." Yi Qingxian smiled, and after a long silence he asked, "Father, why did you let me be the scribe here?" "Because you were a child who could read and write," the priest answered without hesitation. "You did not need food or accommodation to be arranged for you, and you worked for half of the wage. You also seemed helpless. I thought I would give you a hand." "That's it," Yi Qingxian said in disbelief. "Is that not enough?" Yi Qingxian was silent for a moment and laughed softly, "Father, you really are a good man. Which is why I was good to you." The priest got up and patted his shoulder. "Congratulations, Yi, you are fired. This is your farewell gift." He threw something at Yi Qingxian who caught it. It was a 3-dot ring holy emblem, about the size of a coin. It was a dark gold color, like some kind of token. It was engraved with a line of coating on the edge, but it was so smooth so you could hardly feel the engraving with your hands. "What is this?" "The holy emblem. It means you are accepted by the church. It has been given to you ahead of schedule. I will help you with all the paperwork once I return to the sacred city." The priest said with ease, "With this, you can take a small loan with no interest, and get unlimited help from any church, so at least you won't end up on the streets in the future." "Thank you so much." Yi Qingxian tossed the holy emblem into the air, caught it, and put into his pocket. His big eyes were wide and hopeful. "Anything else? Aren't you supposed to give me a super weapon or a book with roadmaps to a super power?" "I do not have the things you said, but there is an axe in the backyard, do you want it?" Yi Qingxian did not dare taking it. He was not sure if that axe would end up splitting his own skull. "You can go and pack now. When you leave for Avalon, I will not see you off." The priest waved and signaled for him to leave. Yi Qingxian stood there with his mouth open, not sure of what to say. He looked at the slightly aged man in front of him, always cold and stubborn. Father Ban had never been good with words or ever tolerated anyone's mistakes, but was always an exemplary yet strange priest. 5 years ago the priest opened the door of this church, saw Yi in the snow and reached out to him. It was not charity, but a rescue. 5 years later he was about to leave the church, but as he looked at the man in front of him, he was suddenly reluctant to go. He still did not know how to say goodbye at the end, so he just silently nodded his head, turned around, and closed the door behind him. His footsteps showed how hesitant he was to leave. Yi Qingxian looked back, and saw the priest praying. He suddenly felt an overcoming sadness inside him. He could not stay here anymore. He needed to escape. "Father, until now, I still think that I was glad to be saved by you." As he was praying, the priest suddenly heard the young man's farewell words. He was surprised. He looked up in time to see the white-haired boy run out into the sunshine. The sun in the afternoon was intense and dazzling. It swallowed his shadow as if he had walked into his own future. 5 years. That kid was no longer a child. Father Ban's lips trembled for a moment, but he did not call out to the young man. He only watched him run farther and farther until he disappeared. In the long silence, the priest's mouth slightly curved up like a smile. The next day at noon, Yi waited at the dock. He carried a huge suitcase, squatting in a chair. He was waiting for the boat that had departed from Yan'an, and would soon pass through his location in 15 minutes. Its final destination was Avalon. The Titan, the newest ship model, was made in the church's shipyard and purchased by the East India Company. It was rumored that compared to the first generation of cargo ships, the Titan was like a small boat in terms of its weight capacity and speed. These kinds of big ships usually did not pass through such a small pier because the water was too shallow. But when the ships did come, they would send a small boat to deliver mail from all over the world, as well as merchandises the town had ordered. Ye could get on the boat by using the holy emblem and pay the fare afterwards. This was the fastest way to Avalon, which was the least the priest could do to help Yi Qingxian. Wolf Flute was leaving on the same day, but by carriage. Wolf Flute was not leaving until the afternoon, so he and Victor came to send Yi off. You may be a bit nervous since it's your first trip away, but you have nothing to worry about. The bounty reward will be deposited into your church account in about half a month. You just need to go to the church's loan office with your holy emblem to pick it up. Wolf Flute patted his shoulder and continued to ramble on. Take care of yourself at Avalon, and remember to find a hotel near the school first. You will be able to live in the dorm once school starts. Avalon has had some serious pollution issues for the past 2 years, too much smog. You can think of it as bad air, so remember to buy a mask. Then, Wolf Flute paused, his expression turned sour. Be very wary of the damn kids begging for money once you get off the boat. They will steal your money. Do not worry about me, Mr. Wolf Flute. Yi Qingxian laughed. I was one of those damn kids many years ago. You street kids are seriously not cute. Wolf Flute shook his head. Remembering something, he looked around. Seeing that no one had noticed him, he lowered his voice and said, Yi, there is one thing I think I should tell you. Okay. For whatever reason, you have to remember that you cannot say that you are the son of a dark musician in Avalon. He pressed down on the shoulder of the white-haired kid. You are just some young man I met when I was traveling in the East, understand? Yi Qingxian was silent. He looked at the man in front of him with genuine concern in his eyes. Yi smiled reluctantly. You knew. I am a musician. Wolf Flute looked into his eyes and sighed softly. Ever since I realized that you knew the demon of rain, I had suspected it, but I did not expect it to be true. Yi Qingxian was silent. Easterner, silver-white hair with the bloodline of the dragon, as well as your surname Yi. It was all too obvious. I didn't need to think too much to know. Once a scepter musician with great talent, now number 3 on the most wanted list. He killed 16 Anglo-royal musicians 5 years ago, and joined the natural catastrophes. The traitor, Moon Chant. Yi Lanzhao. Wolf Flute sighed. I was shocked that you are his son. It explains the demon of rain. After all, your father was the best demon hunter. My father was not a traitor. Yi Qingxian whispered, he did not betray mankind. The problem is that everyone thinks so. Wolf Flute tried to reorganize his words. At last he sighed, I can only say that he used to be a very good person. After all, when I was in the Royal Academy of Music, I had attended his class about Eastern music theory. He even took me, a poor student, to dinner. You knew him. Only a little. He used to teach at the Royal Academy of Music, but quit after he got married. So, whether you just want to find out what actually happened back then, or if you want to do something about it, I suggest that you disguise yourself as an international student from the East. After all, this will be good for you. In a long silence, the white-haired young man seemed to be thinking hard. Mr. Wolf Flute, are you not afraid? Yi Qingxian suddenly smiled and asked softly, are you not afraid that I will also betray mankind, and become a traitor? Yi, sometimes you are just a little kid who doesn't know himself well. Wolf Flute looked down at him and laughed at him mercilessly, you know. You are the kind that's not very creative even if you are doing bad things. So just be a good guy. As he was speaking, Wolf Flute took out a thick book from his pocket and put it into Ye's hand. This is part of your thank that you gift in advance. Yi Qingxian took the thick book. He realized that it was a notebook covered with a very old leather cover. Inside was small writing and many drawings. The notebook was made very well. Even the leather cover was thicker than any ordinary notebook, and felt like it was made of iron. Next to him, Wolf Flute casually opened the notebook, pointing to one of the pages. This was my notebook when I first went to the academy, including entry music notes from 4 different schools, and some miscellaneous stuff. Oh, yes, this part was written during your father's class. On the page, there were only 2 lines of scribbled notes. The rest consisted of some very strange-looking music notes. It seemed incomplete, and was unable to be identified clearly. Sorry, I was sleeping through my classes at that time. I didn't even know what class it was, ha ha ha. Wolf Flute laughed in embarrassment. Yi Qingxian was silent for a long time, then bowed to him. He put the notebook in his suitcase carefully. I will read it thoroughly. Thank you, Mr. Wolf Flute. Not at all. It's only a notebook. Don't worry, just don't lose it. Wolf Flute looked at Ye's serene eyes and gently patted his shoulder. Do not worry about the past, have a good life. If you can get into the school, I will give you a gift. Is that a promise? It's a promise. Wolf Flute backed up 2 steps, put on his hat, then left in the carriage. The quiet ocean suddenly became turbulent. A huge ship came from a distance, causing big waves to appear, and leaving layers of ripples spreading in all directions. This is as far as I will go with you. Victor lightly punched Yi Qingxuan's chest. Don't miss this place when you're in Avalon. I'm leaving as well, as soon as the priest is gone. Maybe after 2 or 3 years, if you are not doing well, you can come find me, and I will be someone famous by that time. Hey, do you have to be so confident? Yi Qingxian could not help but laugh. With someone as bad as me, I can only do better and better, right? Victor pushed him, as if to drive him away, and rid him of his sadness. No more chatting, hurry up and go. You are going to miss the boat. Don't worry about others while you are in Avalon. I will be fine. You just take care of yourself. In the afternoon sun, the blond boy with the cap grinned, a small stick dangling from his mouth like a pipe. Victor waved goodbye without hesitating because he was convinced that one day they would eventually see each other again. Yi Qingxian hugged him and whispered, "Goodbye, Victor." Old Phil also ran to Victor's side, its tongue sticking out. It stood on its 2 hind legs and patted Victor's shoulder with a saliva-drenched paw, as if to give its best wishes to a little brother. Old Phil hopped into Yi Qingxuan's trunk, ready to leave. Yi Qingxian took a final look at Victor, then set foot on the boat. When the huge ship lifted its anchor and set sail once again, Yi Qingxian stood on the deck, not daring to look back. He knew that behind him, the coast was becoming further and further away. He felt like a part of him was emptied bit by bit. Perhaps a stage of his life had been left behind forever. "Sir, please come with me." A waiter politely interrupted him and led the way. "Your room is ready. We will arrive at Avalon in 3 days. We wish you a wonderful journey." "Thank you." Yi Qingxian smiled. Just like that, the white-haired young man carried a trunk, a suitcase full of old clothes, 2,000 pounds of paper money, an iron box, and a strange old dog, embarking on a journey with no return. He was 17 years old, and had not yet had his coming-of-age ceremony, but he was already an adult. "I'm coming, Avalon." When the boat slowly left the pier and headed off, Victor was the only one left at the terminal. He stared at the ocean motionlessly. His only friend was getting farther away. Sad. Human emotions are so weak. A faint voice appeared, with a short lifespan, humans have wasted so much time because of their hormones. All that just for a good dream. Hey, you old devil. You're really annoying. Victor looked down at his chest, and sighed softly, blah, blah, can you shut up? You dare. I am. Now you're just a worm in a bottle, afraid of the air. If I didn't take you back with me, you would have been eaten by your god as a cold appetizer, Victor said in a cold voice. Dear rain artist, I'm not good with words, so if I had said something wrong, then why don't you come out to bite me? You little devil. I would have killed you if we were in the past. In Victor's pocket was a bottle about the size of the thumb. A worm squirmed like mercury flowing, and roared, I just made a tiny mistake while searching for eternal life. If it wasn't for you, I would have had a new life. Oh. Victor sneered. He did not comment. After a long while, the rain artist finally calmed down. He whispered, why did you have to agitate me? Why can't we help each other? If I find a new body, you will also succeed. It's true what you said, but didn't you get something wrong? Victor looked inside the bottle and at the mercury worm, the terms of our cooperation is just my success, no new body. Bastard. You signed the terms because you desperately wanted to live. Although you can never clearly see the situation, there is one thing I do agree with you about. Oh. Power, old man, power. Victor looked down at his own shadow. In the sun his shadow was shaking and alone, dark and pitiful. I am weak. It must be because I have no power. I have been afraid of many things, but one day, I will be afraid of nothing. In the burning sun, his eyes lit up like coal in the fire, with dark red flames. As long as I am more powerful than anyone else. This year was an ordinary year because the world was as it had always been. Everything in its own place. Nations were fighting or bickering. Natural catastrophes still hid in the darkness, occasionally wandering into the human world, leaving behind disaster and destruction. Old people, as always, bathed in the sun, while drinking afternoon tea, and aging. The women watched over their children, and gossiped about others. The men who brought home the bread, struggled through their jobs in order to provide food for the table. The world was busy as always. The only ones bored with nothing to do were the young. So when they looked around this strange, big world, their eyes would light up because the world seemed like a huge playground, filled with many hopes and dreams. The songs of the old times had ended. The stories of the new heroes had not yet begun. During these awkward days, two young men had a coming-of-age experience on the same day, and were both ready to enter the world. Their future would lead to many different directions. Chapter 20 Welcome to Avalon. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Big cousin, the money's here. Run. In the turbulent flow of people, a child stuck a package into Xuanhuan's arms, then disappeared quickly in the crowd as if they had been slicked down with oil. Don't run, you little devil. He also has a helper. Break his legs. Kill him. Xuanhuan looked back blankly. A group of grim and brawny men were running towards him, holding daggers and chairs. They were staring at the package in his arms furiously. Wait, what is going on here? Xuanhuan had a bad feeling. Half an hour earlier. In the morning of the third day after leaving the town of Lut, the breeze blew in from the distance, and the waves were quiet. The outline of the island could be seen in the distance now, and on the deck of the Titan were many people hustling and bustling about. Be Noel them, dear passengers, please do not leave your seat until the boat stops. The waiters tried to maintain order with bitter faces. They shouted over the speaker, because of berth restrictions, we are temporarily unable to enter the harbor. Please be patient. During the meantime, let's look to the right. That white ship is a brother boat of the Titan named Nick, which was created at the same time. The passengers did not care about what the waiters were saying. They continued nibbling peanuts and laughing. In the crowd, babies wailed, and big men roared with deep voices. In the crowd, the white-haired teenager was squeezed against the stern, squatting with a group of sailors smoking pipes. The sailors did not mind sitting in the sun with a little child. Xuanhuan also had nothing to fear. Compared with the well-dressed rich folks, he felt more relaxed in front of the sailors. "Hey, sir," Yi Qingxian asked, "do you have to wait so long every time?" "It's because the berths are all occupied." Next to him, the sailor smoked a pipe, pointing in the direction of the port. He was vaguely able to see warships guarding a white ship slowly entering the harbor. Not far from the sea, several ships together were also waiting. "Are those all occupied?" Yi Qingxian took a look. "Are you sure?" "Can't help it. Those are ships from Yunlu, escorted by the Royal Navy." The man blinked with his ambiguous eyes and with a tacit smile, said, "And, have you heard that the one on board?" "What?" Yi Qingxian was confused. "Her Royal Highness, the Princess of Yunlu. Don't you know? The news is all over Avalon. Yunlu. I've only heard that it's an enclave in the east. It only has a governor. Where does the princess come from?" "You are far behind, little boy." The sailor patted his shoulder. "The governor is no different from the king. Plus, Yunlu dominates the sea trade in the east and the west. They control tea, spices, and silk, which makes them very rich. The people from the east even said that their emperor's treasury had been moved to the sea." "Hee hee." Someone next to him suddenly laughed. "This time, will they borrow money again? The more the debt, the less the worry. They had borrowed tens of millions, but there would be tens of millions more to borrow. They can't pay it back anyway," the man scoffed. "I say, the empire on which the sun never sets will be gone soon." "Ah." Yi Qingxian felt that they were talking about some dangerous topics. "I heard the princess of the Yunlu is a beauty, only 17 years old, but is already a musician at the resonance level." "What a pity," the sailor next to him sighed. "What is?" "It is said that the royal family wants the prince to marry the princess." The sailor sneered. "But everyone in the Anglo kingdom is aware that the prince likes sheep more than women." "Sheep?" Yi Qingxian was in shock. "Yes, sheep." The smoking sailor nodded and softly sighed, "Sheep. Sheep." The sailors around exchanged looks with each other and started laughing together. At that very moment, from the bottom of the cabin came a sheep's cry. Not knowing why, Yi Qingxian suddenly felt that the adult's world was really dirty. 15 minutes earlier. "Come, do not hesitate, do not be confused. Pay 50 coins pay, you will get 500 in return." Within the tavern in the harbor area, everyone was moving and hurrying about. Through the tobacco smoke and the sweat in the air, there was a child's voice. Many rough sailors that had just gotten off the boat now surrounded a table, counting the money in front of them with bitter faces. At the center, a dirty child shuffled the cards in his hands. He looked very happy. "That round of blackjack was all thanks to you all for taking care of me. It's rare for so many powerful men to think highly of a kid like me, so let me entertain you and play another round." He looked about 13 years old with a soft hat. His face dirty was thin like a little beggar. But his actions were so fast, comparable with a professional dealer. This little kid had entered the pub an hour ago. No one knew where he got those $40 from. He began to bet on the dice with the guests in the pub. Now, he had already gotten almost half of the gamblers' money, and lured the other half of the gamblers to his own table. In the back, the bartender wiped the glass with cold face, indifferently watching how much money the little devil could cheat into his pocket, or if a red-eyed sailor pulled out a knife and threw the kid into the sewer. "Come, come, do not quit." The kid did not realize his situation at all. He reached out, grabbing all the money that he had won, and smiled. Buy big, win big, buy small, win small. Life's opportunity is in front of you, the success is near. On the opposite side of the table, a group of red-eyed grown-ups bared their teeth and dropped all the silver coins from their pockets onto the table. "Again. I have 400 here. If you are able to, you can take it all." "Okay. The kid laughed so hard that his eyes would not open. I like you, big brother. You are so straightforward. Let's do it again. The island of Avalon was the capital in the kingdom of Anglo. 300 years ago, the musician Arthur controlled 12 phantom beasts by the chapter of the Golden Victory, and opened up the island of Anglo. Since then, the aristocratic blood had passed on from generation to generation on the island. For centuries, the territory of the kingdom had continuously expanded. It had already done so from the Avalon Island to the surrounding continent. Half the territory was now ocean, the other half land. Avalon, the capital island, had also become more and more developed after hundreds of years of repair. Shrouded by perennial white fog, the city was built with the white stone of the mountain. From the palace on top of said mountain, the city was divided into 9 ring areas and then circled around, until the end, spreading into the sea. Nowadays, the temple of the old age had been buried under the sea. But the crown of the city still stood above the ocean, surrounded by the 30.2 outer city islands. Every traveler who set their feet on the outer ring of the harbor would see the huge stone the King Arthur left, inscribed with the giant's handwriting, God bless the kingdom. Unfortunately, God never blessed tramps and little beggars. If someone had no money to ride the carriage, when he stepped on the pier, his first step would be in the mud and he would be surrounded by old women who held all sorts of strange local specialties and empty-handed beggars. After a wave of shopping, the traveler, holding all sorts of poor-quality souvenirs, would be enticed by a gypsy for the chance to see a glimpse of his future, not having realized that his wallet had been taken from the big hole cut in his pockets. 10 minutes ago, Yi Qingxian set his feet on the port, sniffing the slightly smelly air, suddenly feeling that he missed his old home. He took out a soft hat from his pocket and stuffed his glaring white hair into his hat. He bent over, staring at his reflection in the water to make sure there was nothing suspicious on his body. Don't got anything. Yi looked back at the beggar who was groping his pocket. You're late. I want to know where my wallet is too. Pooh, such a cheapskate. A few beggars spat at him, gave him a couple of rude gestures, and moved on to the next target. Yi Qingxian proudly laughed. He simply did not have any money on him as all the money was with old Phil. He finally released old Phil from the suitcase. The stir-crazy old Phil bit him on his hand, hurting Yi Qingxian so much that his mouth started twitching. However, old Phil did not bite too hard for the sake of Yi being its servant for such a long time. Then the big dog shamelessly started playing around on the muddy road in Avalon City. Soon after, it had become a very dirty dog. Avalon is still the same. I won't be surprised no matter what happens here, Yi Qingxian murmured, looking around. He had hardly finished speaking when he heard continuous loud noises of ping-pong balls from behind. A figure ran into his arms and put a bulging package into his hands. Big cousin, the money is here. The child secretly winked at him, heavily breathing. Run fast. Well, wait. Yi Qingxian stared at the package in his arms, turning back, and then felt something whiz by him. The dagger flew through the air and gently scratched his ear and landed on the street. What is going on? A group of angry men were holding beer cups, chairs, 2 axes, and several daggers. They rushed out from the bar growling, and dashed toward him. Catch him. They're together. Someone's red eyes were locked on him. No way. Yi Qingxian's scalp was tingling. What's the situation? Something bad was happening, right? Bang. Another axe barely hit his hand, then hit the wall behind him. Kill that cheater. I'll pay the killer 500 pounds. The one who lost the game roared. There was no time to say anything. Yi Qingxian turned around quickly and ran as fast as he could. Hey! Don't run, little boy. Come back. With all his might, Yi chased the kid who was crazily laughing in front of him. For a long time, he ran down the streets where he used to be chased countless times. In the front of him was the naughty kid, next to him was his own dog, and behind him was a group of people calling for his death. He was swept into this mess somehow. In the rush, Yi Qingxian could not help but roar, when did this place become like this? It's always been like this. Facing the smelly sea breeze, the naughty kid turned to see him. He could not help but grin, happily running in front of him. Hey, country guy, welcome to Avalon.